Hello and welcome to the Beau Show. I'm your host, Beau Braden. Today's guest is JT Rogers, a singer-songwriter out of Los Angeles, California. He's a dear friend of mine, and I cannot wait for you guys to meet him. Josh, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Well, better now that you're here, man. I am really excited to have you on. This is a really special guest to me. Oldest friend, well, not oldest friend, but longest friendship I've had since we were in diapers, really.
Yeah.
And you've always been a really special person to me, and someone that even if we're not talking for a couple of months, I know that I can call you out of nowhere and you can call me and we'll pick up like we never left. I'd love to start off, you kind of give me your background and what you do and all that.
Yeah. So my name is JT Rogers. You can call me Josh. I am a indie pop singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist. I live in Los Angeles now, but I'm from Seattle. Very queer targeted because I identify as transgender, so a lot of my stuff is queer love songs and also just some good stuff. I like to fuse emo with like indie pop and like make it like a modern take on emo music. I like things to be creative and never predictable, so I like to have fun with that for sure.
I think to start off, I want to just kind of hear your journey with discovering yourself and how music was a part of that.
Yeah, so I first started music. I think I started on piano, classical piano, when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So I was really young. I think like a great aunt of mine passed away around that time, and they had nothing to do with her grand piano. So my grandmother was like, give it to them. So I inherited this big piano, and I started lessons, and very quickly from there I moved on to guitar and started really like learning different types of instruments and different types of sounds other than classical, once I understood like the music theory and how things worked. So yeah, I guess I've always identified as transgender. It's something that I always knew about myself, but I didn't really have a word for it until it became more accepted. The majority of my life, if you really think about it and put it into perspective, I mean, I was showing that I had gender dysphoria from such a young age, that I was around when it was still talked about as like a mental illness. And so for the majority of my life, it was kind of treated that way until, I hit like high school or whatever, and it was recognized differently. So having a unique experience like that, it isn't all too common to, be this age and be out at the time where it was treated that way. So I have like a lot of, unique perspectives and experiences from just being trans so young and being so sure of myself and my identity from such a young age, which isn't super common. So I like to use my, unique perspective and my unique voice to appeal to especially, the Gen Z crowd and people that are now finally starting to recognize that, this is a thing. It's always been a thing in history, and, we should make it, a modernized, accepted thing. And so, yeah, I think music has always been just a way of me just processing through all those emotions. It's always been super helpful, and that's why I think art's so essential. Definitely a good outlet for me. And that's why I would consider myself very emo. But people really dig it and tend to relate to the things I talk about. So it's worked out pretty well for me.
And would you explain a little bit more about what that emo sound is? Because I think a lot of people don't have a great idea what that really means from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, so basically, emo, I'm pretty sure started in the 80s or 90s originally. And it's kind of evolved from there. You know, you have this first wave of things that sound like Smashing Pumpkins and, you know, usually are much more obscure bands than that, though. And then, you know, you got this wave that came again in like the late 90s, early 2000s of pop punk and Green Day and Blink 182. And that really fed into the emo scene of that time, where you see bands like My Chemical Romance and Panic at the Disco earlier on, and Fall Out Boy. And then in modern times, recent times, emo is really starting to dive its way into all types of music like pop, trap. You see Billie Eilish is technically emo, but alternative pop. See things like Lil Peep use samples from earlier waves of emo to make it more modern. And then you have all of that emo rap wave that came with that. And I think nowadays, I really want to just take that emo going into pop music, and just fusing it and making it more relevant. And because that's what a lot of people are doing right now. So yeah, I think I'm pretty passionate about that. I think that's pretty cool.
Do you think that your sound is who really inspired your sound? Because I feel like there's a lot of different things coming together. Is there somebody
Yeah.
that's really popular right now that this could even relate to?
Yeah, and I think that's what's really cool about it, is that there aren't a lot of people doing what I'm doing,
Hmm.
and that's why I answered that way. Because I am taking from things of all decades. You could say that, yeah, I sound like Cave Town, which is, you know, an emo indie pop, bedroom pop kind of artist, which a lot of people are aware of, who's also trans. But on all honesty, I take things from every decade. I take things from early emo. I even take things from 80s music, 60s music. I take things from jazz, bossa nova, and I make it all relevant in my own way. So that's why it's such an ambiguous answer. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I have a couple demos out, and I'm really excited to put this EP coming up soon. I have 5 songs already started on, and it's in the making right now. I'm just so excited.
Would you tell me more about what this EP is?
The EP is called All Through Time and Space, and it's just like 5 of like my favorite songs I've written, with an outro track to wrap it up. Just kind of like this mini album, 5 songs. And basically, it's just going to showcase what I've got. I'm going to release it on all popular platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. Everyone's going to be able to have access to it. It's just, yeah, some of my best material. I'm so excited to finally put it out.
How did you come up with the name for that?
I took it from a lyric in the first song. I decided that for my EP, I wanted the aesthetics, the name, and the album cover to all be taken from lyrics of the music itself. So the album cover is going to feature like a tearing rope and like a psychedelic background, and that's all taken from lyrics. And All Through Time and Space is again taken from a lyric. So it's going to be, I'm super excited. I can't even stop talking about it.
And that's super exciting. How long has this been in the works for you?
So this is a great question, because I've actually been working on this EP since July or August of 2020 this year. So it's already been, 6 months, give or take. It's got a lot to be put on it. So I'm really excited for how detailed and just interesting it's going to all turn out. Because the last steps that I have right now at this point aren't going to take very long. So I'm so excited. I've been just listening to the tracks and just manifesting, and this is going to be a really dope experience.
That's going to be really cool, and I'm really excited about it. What inspired your initial move from Seattle?
So a lot of my songs are written about Seattle. Seattle is always going to be just, home for me. I love the city. I'm very connected to it. The issue with the city and the last few years I was there was just how rapid it was changing. It was just not working for me career wise anymore. The music scene was downgraded since the 90s, one could say, and people who did get locally hot there, they just kind of stayed in the area. There wasn't as much of an expansion outside of the Pacific Northwest. Just the knocking down historical buildings for apartment complex, and just venues were going to be knocked down, and it just wasn't. It was sad. I needed to move to a place where gentrification wouldn't take the culture from it in the way of like the arts, which LA, the art is not going anywhere. So
Yeah. Do you think that's reflected among the artists in the Northwest as well? I mean, just from I'm not really involved in that scene with music production and all that, but from what I've heard from people coming up through it and listening to other people on podcasts that have come up from Seattle and Portland and in these cities, is that there's a sense of either complacency in staying where you're at or stepping over people within. Have you experienced any of that when you were in the Northwest?
yeah, there's a lot of that. I could never really get a team of individuals together that was having the same mindset, wanting to make the same kind of music, and were equally devoted to it. And then the people that did have that, they were doing their own thing. It was extremely cliquey and elitist. And there was definitely some really good folks out there, but it wasn't enough to be able to do what I was trying to do down there.
Who's your team now?
So I'm working with my producer, who's been a buddy of mine since middle school. His name is Carter Costello. He's a producer working with me on this project. And yeah, this time I'm definitely trying to have a smaller team. I'm trying to do most things myself, but yeah, it's just me and Carter this time. But it's pretty chill. I'm pretty down with it.
So you're really making a lot of your music pretty much all by yourself until the production side, or what?
Yeah. So a great thing about the stuff that I do is I do everything myself. In my own apartment, in my own home, I lay down the drums, I lay down the bass, guitars, keyboards, vocals, harmonies. I even pre-mix it just to, see where I want things to be. And then I send it over to a producer to just make it sound radio ready. And some people are definitely doing that, but it's not the most common thing, and that's what makes me stand out artistically. Also, nobody else really has my voice, which is really fun. So
I was going to ask about that too. You have a really distinct and cool voice, and I was going to ask, were you, because you've always had that amazing voice, were you worried about how that was going to change when you got on testosterone?
yeah, so I've been on T now for 4 years. Also had like 2 different surgeries. And I was kind of worried because there were some people that just, especially in the singing and trans community, that just don't transition if they need to take testosterone, because a lot of people, they just can't sing afterwards. And it took me to a place where I just knew it was the right thing that I had to do. And I just kind of had faith in it. And it turned out for the better. For a couple of years, I didn't really have a falsetto voice. It would just be cracky. And I thought I would never get that back, but I ended up getting it back. And my voice has actually really, really improved since going on testosterone and becoming comfortable in the way I sound. I think that really did it for me, was just the confidence it gave me. I have like a 4-octave vocal range now, and I did not have that before. I didn't even lose a lot of my upper register. I just gained an octave or 2 low, which was blessing.
That's really cool to hear. Would you talk a little bit more of how you found your confidence and sound through music?
I take from a lot of different inspirations. I grew up on classic rock music while my mother listened to things like Motown, R&B, and modern pop music and hip hop. There was different sounds coming from the home I grew up in, but whenever I would actually go and write a song, there might be things that I get influenced by, but the majority of it is just me. It's just what I feel is the right melody or the right phrase to come next, and it just turns out to be a certain way. I really think that that's how art should be done, because things come out just super duper new and original, and it's definitely really cool right now, especially when music is just starting to take like a change in the way it's going. If you've noticed, especially popular music, do what comes out of your mouth, what comes out of your brain, and not what comes out of all your favorite artists. Even though that is like, it's always good to have influences. There's just something just pure that comes out when you write the way that I prefer to write, and that's why I do it.
Tell me more about Josh. I want to
My
hear more
name?
about you.
Oh, about me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up in Seattle. There's definitely, there was a lot of instability that kind of slipped under the radar when I was growing up. And it was definitely always just a show of keeping it all together and making the family look just healthy. And I definitely came out of it very misunderstood. So a lot of the songs, especially that I've written, because I started writing music when I was like 8 years old or something, but a lot of the songs I've written are from my childhood that I have just bringing back into my adult life. And there's just like a lot of my stuff is about healing because of that situation. It's very common, especially for transgender youth, to just not be in the best environment for the way you thrive. I'm a very alternative thinker. I learn in very alternative ways. I think in my own way, and it's just nobody really understood me. So a lot of my stuff is just kind of not being understood and having to do everything myself, which in the end made me a powerful human being. But it was definitely really hard to navigate for the first 20 years or so. But yeah, I think today I'm doing really well, and there really is another side, especially trans youth. It can be really, really, really hard to just grow up and be trans. And a lot of us, we spend our times being homeless. I know that I was couch surfing for a lot of my teenage years. It just wasn't stable at home, not just because of my identity, but there was just a lot of background stuff going on, and it's just really common for some reason. Really, when the power is in your hands, like when I turned 18, like I was just super focused. I put everything the way that I wanted to be in my power, and it took years to like really build the life the way that I wanted to. And I'm only starting to get that now. I'm 21 years old, but there really is another side. You just kind of have to you gotta want it, you gotta know that there's a beautiful side to life that you've been missing this whole time. And I think that's what I want to do, especially just like being an image in the media of a successful transmasculine individual who did succeed and did overcome the barriers that life threw at him. Because 41% of us, we have attempted suicide, and transmasculine folks have the highest suicidal rate, which is not very talked about. And I think and there's just not a lot of transmasculine people in the media. When people think about a transgender person, they think about like a stereotypical trans woman looking person. They don't really think about everything else and all the spectrum that goes along with it. And I want to just set as like a positive example, like, yeah, I had that transmasculine experience that isn't in the media and needs to be shown. That's a big goal of mine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you could go back, what's something that you would tell yourself growing up?
Well, you know what's best for yourself. I think that was the biggest thing. nobody believed me growing up that I knew what was best for me. And I'm not saying it's a universal experience, but I'm sure it's one that, you know, I'm not the only one that's had that. And I was kind of forced to walk the path that, you know, like the adults in my life thought that I should walk, but it wasn't the right path for me. And I knew what was right for me. I ended up doing it and being successful at it. So I would just tell myself, you know, stick through it. You know what's right for yourself. And there will be another side, and you'll be able to be exactly who you're meant to be. But probably wouldn't have believed you. I'm gonna be honest.
I mean, I think you always knew, and I do want to say again how proud of you I am getting where you are now, and after growing up with you and seeing only a portion of what went into that. Like, I am so proud of you, and I'm so glad that you're here now with us.
Thank you.
And it is so powerful for you to talk about these things and give your story and shed on light on something that really isn't talked about. And I feel like I was just so lucky to have you in my life to open me up to so many different things. And I think being around you is something that really impacted how I thought from a really young age. I mean, seeing a kid, I mean, that was from when we were toddlers. I mean, that it didn't really it didn't matter what people said you were. I mean, that was my brother, you
Yeah,
know.
that's so sweet of you. I never
And
knew that you felt that way growing up.
oh, always. I mean, from when we were kids. I mean, I remember we would go, we'd be playing in the street or whatever, and somebody said she, and it like called you she, and I it just felt so wrong to me, and I was like, no, that's not, that's he, you know. And it was so wild to me when do you remember when we went to Chicago when we were 10?
That's like one of my favorite memories ever. Like, I love Chicago.
That was such a great trip with our dads and your grandpa, who your grandpa was a really great man too.
Such a great man.
But I just remember we were at that Gino's East, the really great pizza place,
Yeah.
and having that huge meaty pizza. And I was like, hey, let's go to the bathroom. And we got up there, and I was walking in, and I looked back, and I said, what are you doing? And you said to me, I don't know which one to go in. And
Yeah.
it felt like the world stopped at that point. I I just remember thinking as a 10, 11-year-old, like, oh my God, like my brother's standing here, just wanted like something I never think about, and not knowing where you fit into these boxes that, and it's a bathroom, but you're not fitting into these boxes that the world's trying to put you in. And
Yeah, it was, yeah. It's definitely too young to be dealing with that kind of BS, you know? Like, just feeling like your body doesn't align with your spirit is traumatizing, you know? And everybody around me, they could see that my spirit was male. It was very strongly so. And that's how I would describe it. And a lot of people don't like the term born in the wrong body because, you know, they'll be like, oh, still my body. And you don't, it doesn't have to be this way to be my body or to be my identity, but there's still, you know, a disconnect for a lot of people. Even if you love yourself the way you are. Definitely, it was really hard, especially just before going on that hormonal transition. It was very confusing. And at that point that you speak of, like, I didn't even know what transgender was. I didn't know anybody else had the same experience. And I'm sure there were people that I knew that technically did, but they didn't talk about it. And my experience was just so intense that I couldn't really hold it in. I was always like trying to get some help because I didn't know how to deal with it. But nobody really knew how to help me. At that point, like, my diagnosis was gender identity disorder. And I mean, that wasn't very long ago. And you think like, in the 80s, homosexuality was considered like a mental health illness. And, but, people don't really think about, and it's not really talked about or taught that, what was it? How many years ago? Like 6-7 years ago, being transgender was. That's not very long ago. I mean, I grew up most of my life being treated as though my identity was some sort of mental illness by those who didn't really understand it. And that's because the doctors were telling them to do that. So I never really found myself until I hit almost high school, and there were other people that talked about it, and then I could put two and two together,
Could you talk more about what that shift was like, the cultural shift?
When things started being a little more accepted in America.
Yeah.
And it's still happening.
Yeah.
But I think it's very interesting to be born during a decade where I watched that at the time that I do. It's definitely a really different world even from like 5 years ago. And that's something that's constantly changing. And when I was, let's say, okay, so the DSM-5 started talking about gender identity disorder.
And what does that stand for? Sorry.
What'd you say?
And what does DSM-5 stand for?
I don't know. It's like a diagnostic book for doctors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was like, I mean, there's like several of them, but that's one that's kind of acclaimed. It says gender dysphoria instead of gender identity disorder. I think from in 2014 it started doing that, maybe 2013. So I mean, before that, doctors just thought it was a medical disorder. I mean, I was at psychiatrist after psychiatrist, and they were trying to figure out, they were so intrigued by me. Like, there was just not so much research on what I was going through. And I had trouble finding doctors that didn't want to just do like studies on me, that was just wanting to treat me. And it didn't help that, I had post-traumatic stress disorder from a very, very, very young age, but I didn't know how to talk about it. And I didn't know how to describe how I was feeling. So there was just so much going under the radar. I also struggle with Tourette's. So they saw the gender thing and they're like, oh, this is a mental illness kind of thing because this person has some neurological things going on because I was ticking and stuff. But that kind of changed, especially like 2014. I came out as transgender, and that was when things were starting to be recognized more as they are now. It was kind of a fight to get on hormones. I didn't actually get on hormones till 3 years after that, because they're like, oh, what if you like change your mind or whatever, it was still the bullshit transphobia.
Yeah.
Basically, things just change so quickly that it's hard to keep up. As a trans person, it's hard to keep up with how many people you're aware of will support you or not, just because society's view is changing so rapidly. I'm still very scared to tell anybody. But I've started to realize, at least living in Los Angeles is becoming more and more accepted as a normal thing. And that's really strange to me. Really strange to me. I mean, imagine living where the majority of people, even if they're progressive, probably won't accept your identity. It's hard for anybody to really understand what that's like, especially when it's not, your history isn't taught in schools and your issues aren't represented on the media properly. And so people aren't even aware of how sensitive of subjects these things are in general. We've got a long way to go.
Oh, no doubt.
Like I said, it was a mental illness 6-7 years ago. So it's not very long.
Yeah, no, that's just something that's so wild to me. And I'm still so thankful for having you like as perspective in that, like I went to Christian school 6th through 9th grade. And a big reason why I left was I was getting told by teachers in my Bible class that gay people have demons and we need to pray for them and they're choosing to go against God. And I'm like, well, if you're choosing, if they're choosing, why can't I choose it?
Exactly. It's like, why don't you try?
Yeah.
Just how easy it is. Like, I didn't know that, honestly. I mean, I knew you were Christian, and I knew that you were, you practiced Christianity in your home. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that you like saw all of that and were in that kind of situation.
Yeah, no, and was is the key word there.
Yeah.
But it was really hard to watch people that I was growing up around just be ignorant towards these topics where I've seen what that looks like, and you're not the only family member of mine who's gone through these kind of things. And it's like, well, I just don't see why anybody would choose to be hated for how they identify or who they love. And I don't know. I just feel like I can't stress enough how proud I am of you and how much I love you, dude. And
Thank you.
thank you again for being my friend and being here with me and educating me and telling your story, because this is such a powerful story from a perspective that is so underrepresented and something that frankly people just need to hear.
I mean, thank you. I can't even tell you, like, thank you for sticking around even after things kind of just turned 180 in my life. Thanks for like staying through it. I lost people through that, and it wasn't really my fault. I was doing the right thing for myself, but that's life. People come and go, and I'm just glad that you stayed, man. And you're right. It's like, it's even an issue in the transgender community itself. People think that some people aren't actually trans and are making the choice because they want to be, because it's trendy or whatever. It's like nobody does that. And it's such a new concept. The phobia is so normalized within our spaces even. And that's a whole nother just can of worms. Because on one hand, you've got like the society you live in, which you're aware of a bit, that how the struggles can happen. I mean, being trans is beautiful, it's great sometimes, but it's not an easy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then to think that when you go back into the spaces, the community spaces, there's still that there. There's still a level of that there, and all that is just normalization of transphobia. And I'm really just ready to see a shift in the world and how we think about gender, and because it isn't a new thing. There was transgender and non-binary people to date in history, from like Native American tribes, ancient Greece, pretty sure like ancient Rome, Vikings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just always kind of been a thing. So even in like ancient Judaism, they recognized 6 genders. And so I'm just really excited to bring my message to the world. It's gonna be super fun.
Oh yeah, no, and I'm so excited. Would you remind us when that EP is dropping?
Yeah, so early 2021. So if you follow me on Instagram, JT Rogers Music, I'm sure that you'll have the links up and everything. I'll be posting about it there. And a specific date should be in within the next month or two. So that's really exciting.
I am so excited for you. And thanks again for coming off. Do you have any closing statements for us?
Closing, oh man, I had to come more prepared. Stay true to yourself, honestly. And when you make art, make it for you. That's like the biggest thing. Just be genuine inside and out, and people will learn to deal with it. So stay
Amen.
punk rock.
Dude, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, JT. I love you.
I love you too, man.
Thank you all so much for listening. That was JT Rogers, a singer-songwriter out of Los Angeles, California. The links to JT's music and social medias will be in the description, and that's where you will be able to find information on JT's new EP, All Through Time and Space. Thank you all so much for listening. Another special shout out to Dylan Scott for creating the theme music for the Beau show, as well as Alex Rothschild, who created the cover art. Both of their social media links will be in the description as well. Thanks again. Peace.
I'm locked inside of an emotionally dead mind. No one knows the powerful